Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. I don't know what's worse, the fact that I've tried that face aging app that seems to be all over social media at the moment, and it's not a pretty sight. I don't know what's worse, the fact that it's not a pretty sight, or reading how the app actually leaks your data. Or the fact, of course, it costs a fortune to subscribe to the app. Who would pay for that? But I figure that my face is plastered all over the internet as it is, so my days of ruining about the privacy of my image rights are long, long gone. But I'm curious, have you any incriminating images you want to share with me? I'll do your deal. I'll show you mine if you show me yours. So I'll tweet mine over on my Twitter account, which is @NeilCHughes. And if you want to, reply to my tweet and show me what the Face Age app has done to you too. But enough of my tomfoolery. Way back on episode 846, I spoke with Jason Downie, Chief Strategy Officer at Lotame over in Maryland, USA. Now, for new listeners that missed that conversation, or of course long-time listeners that have slept many times since that conversation, Lotame is an Unstacked data solutions company that helps publishers, marketers and agencies find new customers, increase engagement and grow their revenue. But as you all know by now, I'm fascinated by how technology is transforming our world. So the last time I spoke to the guys at Lotame, that was in the US office. So I thought we'd shake things up a little bit and have a chat with the office over here in the UK. So this time, I invite you to buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to London in the UK so we can speak with Christopher Hogg, EMEA Managing Director at Lotame. A massive warm welcome to the show, Chris. Can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Neil, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm Chris Hogg. I head up Lotame's EMEA business. I joined Lotame about 6 years ago, brought them to the European market. Probably worth noting, I had a bit of longer relationship with Lotame as I was their first client for France Telecom Group this side of the pond. And so feel like I've experienced both sides of the market, working for a data vendor, but also working with a data vendor.
Wow, it's funny how life works out sometimes, isn't it? Did you ever envision that as when you were a customer way back in the day, or was it just kind of happened by accident?
Yeah, I did. Obviously, not when I was out searching for a platform that could support us with our data needs back then. But I guess working with Lotame for 2 years, they just felt like the right company for me. And, I started to get interested in moving to the tech side. I've always bought tech, but I thought it'd be interesting to go and work for a technology platform. And they were the first choice in my eyes, just for the experience and, the amount of customer support and the product. It felt right.
And for people that are just tuning in, it could be located anywhere in the world and hearing about Lotame for the very first time, can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of problems it solves for publishers and brands, especially in EMEA?
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to see ourselves as a data solutions business. I guess, more traditionally, our kind of business has been labeled as a DMP. But Lotame has two arms to its business. One is creating technology that enables our customers, whether they're publishers, brands, or agencies, to collect, organize, unify, and analyze all of their first-party data assets. We also have a curated third-party data exchange where we overlay rich sets of third-party data across our customers' first-party data so they can get a more in-depth view, 360 view of their customers, but also gives them additional opportunities to analyze and target their customers.
And data is such a big topic at the moment, especially around big data and using things like artificial intelligence and machine learning to try and leverage the value that's hidden inside that data. But I'm curious, as someone working in the industry, are there any particular trends that you're currently seeing around data?
Yeah, definitely. Of recent, with the emergence of, say, like privacy, like GDPR, obviously there's a lot of press and stuff at the moment about browsers and what they're going to do around targeting and tracking within their environments. I think data, there was a slight, when data first started to merge, there was a bit of a race for scale, and whether that was customers collecting as much first-party data as they could, or whether that was third-party data vendors creating the biggest kind of segments that they could have out there in market. But I think we're now in an age of a bit more sophistication. I think both publishers and brands are becoming very aware that scale is important, but not at the detriment of quality. So we're seeing a lot of initiatives now around scoring, a lot of initiatives around actually the data that we've got, is it of the most value that we can collect? Can we avoid or maybe even drop some of the scale and some of the data that we're collecting to actually have a more robust, stronger set of data for our use cases? So we see a lot more strategy around the application of data. We see a lot more educated strategies around data. So people really do know what they're looking to do now when they come to a company like Lotame. There could be second or third generation around what they're trying to do with their data. And it's really about finding the right fit to actually deliver on the use cases. So definitely quality and finding the right pieces of technology that can give them flexibility to actually deliver on their strategy and their use cases.
And another big topic, of course, at the moment is all around privacy. So I've got to ask, how are the changes with the likes of Apple and Google, how are those changes going to impact data targeting, do you think?
Yeah, that's a very relevant, very topical question, and something that we've been answering, and as a business, still answering all the way through from helping our customers, but also via our product. I think there's a few distinctions that needs to be made. Certainly, it looks like, and we've been talking about it for a number of years, what's the lifespan now of third-party cookies? They do seem to be under pressure, and I think we've started to see the demise of third-party cookies this year, and a path to need to find other uses, other opportunities around how we operate for the consumer's benefit. Let's not ignore the fact that the initiatives like GDPR and initiatives like Apple, Mozilla, and Google are looking at around the browser in their main are good for the internet, and they're good for consumers. But I think cookies get rolled up into a catch-all phrase that different cookies should be treated differently, and I think the browsers are going to be doing that. So where there's third-party cookies, that's obviously one challenge, but there's still other uses of cookies that are a lot more privacy-friendly, like first-party cookies, where they actually stay and remain in the end consumer's domain on the browser. There's other IDs like unified IDs, so the likes of ID5 and the Trade Desk, LiveRAM, DigiTrust. So again, there are other initiatives around actually how do we treat data around those cookies, and it's about finding the right fit between all of those different opportunities on how we can still collect and activate data. And I think activation is the important piece there, but remain within the browser's stipulation, and also law and privacy stipulation. So I think we're moving into an era where the internet's becoming a little bit more locked down, but that's not going to change the requirements of the industry to want to do omni-channel first-party data. It's still important that we do find ways to bring data together and do find ways to be able to activate that data within the wider ecosystem. We're still going to have the challenges where you can't do everything in the browser. So it's important to think about, for brands and publishers, when they're thinking about how am I going to future-proof my business for some of these changes that are afoot, is actually to sit back and ask the right questions to data providers and technology vendors, but also ask it from multiple angles. There are multiple ways to solve the same issues, and really, really dig deep into that. From Lotame's side, we're very much looking at how can we use something that we call cartographer? How do we bring together all these different ID assets to be able to deliver within these environments moving forward?
And like you said, there is a lot of change in the industry at the moment, but equally there's going to be a lot of growth in different areas too. So what kind of growth are you expecting in the data space this year?
Yeah, I think for both publishers and marketers and obviously agencies that we work between, I think, first-party data is going to be critical. I think third-party data, although it's still going to play a part in digital marketing, I think there's going to be a larger emphasis placed on first-party data. So it's critical for businesses to kind of understand and really look into their first-party data and what they've got. And how they can actually use more of that within their data strategies. As I say, this comes back to what we just talked about, IPT and GDPR limits, access to data. So it's important that organizations really do get a grip on that data. And I think transparency is going to be very important when we're looking at these data assets is, okay, where does the data come from? How many hands has that data passed through? Do we have all the consent on that data? And I think that whole piece, and any sort of organizations and businesses that can support clients to understand those first-party data assets, the better. I think flexibility. I think brands are going to, marketers and publishers are going to be doing a lot more of in-housing these type of things because it's so important and there's so much risk, if I'm honest, if you do get this wrong today, and is balancing that risk reward. And I think a lot of people are going to start to look at customized solutions that best fit their use cases, but also minimize that risk. And I think we're going to see a lot of data actually becoming in-housed at large brands where before they might have had other organizations managing that. And then if they are going to have other organizations managing that, I think that transparency piece comes back as well. We've seen a huge increase in the uptake of what we call second-party data. This year alone, we've seen about 460% growth in buyers actually going to sources of data, again, for that transparency, so they know there's been consented, they know where it's been collected from, they know the components of how that data was put together. So again, it just gives them a little bit more trust and comfortability that the data they're using, A, is one, is unique, two, it's of high quality, and three, that all of the requirements around consent have been met.
And when it comes to things like data management platforms, are you noticing any different needs or are the industry needs changing there at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you go back 5 years and maybe not even 5 years ago, go back 3 years, the brands and publishers would take stock of their data needs, then tap into a one-size-fits-all kind of MarTech stack or platform. What we're noticing today is people reaching out with very customized use cases. So one thing that we do as a business, and we kind of label that unstacked data solutions, is, okay, look, in today's era, there's so many different use cases and workflow, and we're seeing a lot of larger publishers and brands actually bringing some of this stuff in-house, and they do have data engineers now, they do have data scientists working within their organization. You wouldn't have got that 3 to 5 years ago, especially at publishers. And they've actually got the skill sets now to build some of their own products and stuff. So what we do a lot with our customers is, we offer point solutions, so they can take 3 or 4 ingredients from Lotame and they can actually build their own workflows on top of that. So again, it comes back to that transparency. It comes back to that need to control, need to understand what and how your data is being processed. And we're finding this is a big benefit also because it's pushing boundaries and it's getting actually people to think not only how they commercialize that data, but how that data is collected and actually how they process that data right the way throughout the value chain.
Excellent. And just for listeners in and outside of this industry, and help them visualize the kind of things that we're talking about here and the kind of value it's offering to businesses, are there any use cases or case studies of how brands are leveraging data that you can possibly share with us today?
Yeah, and I think that it's, brands are always trying to push the buttons in terms of how can I get more value and actually how can we do new things. But a trend that I'm seeing a little bit more of recent is sort of co-oping data. And I don't mean that, although this is happening, with the likes of Ozone on the publisher side, and before that, consortiums like Pangea. But brands are now actually going to publishers, and there is a little bit more of a freedom now in terms of, okay, look, I have this data set of known customers. You have a large footprint within the target market that I'm looking for. How can we actually do a little bit clever cooperation between these two sets of data to actually drive the value rather than just targeting wide across your properties? Can we do some kind of modeling or machine learning across my customers so I can actually find like-minded people within your data sets? So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and I think we're going to see publishers become more data savvy, more data science driven. And brands actually working a bit more closer with their buying points, whether it's direct or even through their agencies to get the most out of the two data assets. And as I say, as we're going to that need of transparency and that need of quality, so maybe these data sets are slightly smaller than what they used to be able to co-op good quality data together to actually drive outcomes. I think we're going to see a lot more of them. We're certainly starting to see more of that than typically we would have in past years.
And there certainly is a lot of change in the industry at the moment. But I'm curious, is there anything that particularly excites you about the road ahead? And equally, what role will Lotame play in that future vision of yours?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's quite topical at the moment, and something that I've been paying very, very close interest is the notion of a unified ID. I think we've operated in two very siloed parts of the business. As on one side, you've got the large, whether you call them tech players or social players, but you've got the walled gardens. Then on the other side, you've kind of got the rest of the internet. I've always referred to that as the open internet. You've got the closed internet. And obviously the open internet and the closed internet, they have their challenges. They always have the challenges also of bridging the two gaps. But I actually think across the open internet, we're going to start to see a lot more unification between tech vendors. And that's definitely a place where Lotame can play. And now, how can we, as a group of tech vendors, actually start to share unified IDs by working with multiple different partners to actually help our customers make the best across those multiple different omni-channel activation paths. And more excitingly in the future, and again, there's been a little bit of talks about it. I'd be very keen and, would welcome the day if one of the walled gardens would actually start to look at that and perhaps, play with the rest of the industry. So I think that's a very exciting space and one to watch. And I think we see the emergence of these unified IDs really the tail end of last year. And I think we've seen them grow and start to grow momentum throughout this year. Lotame are doing a number of pilots and tests with different IDs. It comes back to some of the future questions, earlier questions as well about how we're going to operate in the challenging ecosystem around browsers, etc. And I think some of this unification is going to support that.
Certainly sounds you're going to be incredibly busy in the next few months. And for people listening that want to keep up to speed with the kind of changes that are happening in the industry and find out more details about yourself and even contact a member of your team, can you just point them in the direction of the best way of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find all of our contact information across the world. We have offices in North America, Mumbai, Sydney, Singapore, London. So if you go onto our website, www.lotame.com, click on the contact us page and you'll get information of how to email us, how to call us, or how to find us in our offices.
Excellent. Well, I'll add all those links to the blog posts that will accompany this podcast. I can't thank you enough for coming on today. There's so much value that you've added to this conversation where a lot of people have got a lot of uncertainty, and I, for one, it becomes much more clearer to me after listening to you there, and I hope it's as valuable for the listeners too. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today, Chris. Thanks.
No, thanks for having me on the podcast, and I look forward to continuing to follow you.
As the importance of audience data grows, sophisticated marketers are becoming more interested in the quality of data to ensure that they can optimise their ad spend. And chatting with Chris, I quickly learned that we're seeing marketers move away from the shortcuts that help them achieve scale, because those scales have been found to undermine quality. And those tactics include cookie stuffing. And another issue is the mischaracterization of data, which happens when audience segments are incorrectly identified or labelled as interpretations. And this problem is only growing as data becomes more valuable. But if you're listening and thinking, no, Neil, this is my area of expertise and I've got a few things to add too, don't worry, you can do that. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes, or pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, and make sure you get your voice heard and that you're a part of this conversation that we're having today too. Because that's how we all learn from each other, and that's why I record this podcast every day. So while I'm waiting for your replies, I'll make myself a drink and wait for you in my favourite armchair in front of the telly box. But you better make it quick, because I might have one of my famous power naps, or as I prefer to call them, reboots. As I'm getting old, I seem to have more of them in the afternoon. So keep those messages coming in, and a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.